Hi, this is Lydia Kang, author of Quackery, A Beautiful Poison, and The November Girl, and you're listening to the Cook Memorial Public Library Podcast.
Welcome to the Cook Memorial Public Library Podcast, where we invite you to spend a few minutes with the staff here at our library. Today we're going to talk to Erica, a member of our Popular Services Department and a voracious reader. Back in December, Erica shared a blog post with her 2018 reading resolutions. We thought we'd catch up with her and see how those resolutions are going, and to get some tips for those who might have set their own reading resolutions. So, even if you've already broken your resolution, listen on for some ideas and tips to get you back on track.
Thanks for being on the podcast.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah. So we're here today to talk about reading resolutions. You wrote a blog post for the library's blog back in December about your 2018 reading resolutions.
Yes, I am a planner. I like to plan ahead.
Yes.
Have really good intentions.
Yes, I think we all do, especially when it comes to reading plans.
Yes,
that always tend to fall by the wayside. So, what have been your resolutions for 2018 so far?
So my resolutions for 2018 were, one, to read more diversely. Mm-hmm. I think it's really important to read about perspectives that are not my own, because I'd like to kind of broaden my worldview, and I think that's my favorite way to understand other people's perspectives, is to read about them. My second one was to read more nonfiction, because as I looked through my reading log for last year, I had single digits in terms of how many nonfiction titles I read, which is
and that is in
not
comparison
good.
to how many books overall did you read?
I read 150 books last year.
So a very small percentage were nonfiction.
I'm not good at math, but it was a terrible percentage. And it really hit home when I was trying to come up with titles for the library's best fiction and nonfiction of 2017. And I was like, oh, I have very little to contribute here. This is a problem. So I knew that I wanted to read more nonfiction. And I believe that my goal was 2 titles a month.
Okay.
If I read 2 titles a month, there's 12 months in the year, that would be 24 titles, which was like a 3-fold increase.
Yeah, I would say that's a very good increase.
Yeah, I felt like percentage-wise, that was something to be impressed by. So I wanted to read 2 nonfiction titles a month. And then my third resolution was, I was going to try to knock off books from my to-be-read pile. And I think everybody has that shelf in their house or that pile on their nightstand that's been sitting there for maybe years.
Yes.
And it has a super thick coating of dust.
Yes.
And I was like, I'm trying to declutter my house. I need to either read these books and get rid of them, or read these books and love them so much they go on my keeper shelf, or if I just can't bring myself to read them, then they need to go on to someone who might appreciate them more than me.
Right.
So those were my 3 resolutions. I felt pretty happy with the number of books that I read last year, so I thought reading more isn't really my goal.
Right. 150 is a very high goal for quite a few people.
Yeah, so I felt like trying to read more might result in me just rushing through, and I wanted to kind of up the quality of my reading instead.
For broadening your reading horizons.
Yes.
For reading different perspectives. Are you seeking out any particular genre, any particular author? Are you looking for the author's perspective, or are you seeking out, say, a character whose perspective you haven't heard from before, regardless of where the author is from?
I tend to read, in terms of genre, I tend to read pretty widely. Here at the library, I am the selector for paperback romance, as well as inspirational fiction. So those, combined with the things that I naturally gravitate toward, mean that I'm reading across a lot of genres.
Right.
I also really love young adult and middle grade fiction.
Okay.
And so I'm reading across age ranges. At this point, I'm challenging myself to read books that are about characters who are different than me. And I feel most comfortable reading about those characters when the book is by a person from that perspective. So, that's often called own voices.
Right.
So that's to say, if I'm going to read a book about the experience of being an African-American person growing up in the South, I would like to read about that by someone who is African-American,
right,
and has grown up in that culture. Even if the experiences aren't exactly the same, I feel like they bring more authenticity to it. And, that's the same with a lot of other identities and marginalizations and lifestyles. I think listening to those voices means trying to seek out people who have lived that experience.
Right. We'll talk about the nonfiction.
Oh, okay.
Books. Is there any particular type of nonfiction book you're hoping to read this year? Or anything that kind of you already gravitate towards?
I tend to want to read nonfiction that has a clear perspective on things, a defined kind of voice, but not something that's trying to push me towards any particular conclusion.
Okay.
So last year I had read a book called The Not Quite States of America by Doug Mack, and that's actually something that I blogged about for Shelf Life. And what I really enjoyed about it, Doug Mack is a travel writer, and he went to all of the U.S. territories and commonwealths. Like, he went to American Samoa, he went to Puerto Rico, he went to all these different places that we know are kind of something, they're a part of the United States, but they're not actually a state. And he wanted to know, what is the deal with these places? Okay. And what I liked is he genuinely went in with a curious spirit.
Okay.
He really wanted to understand better. Right. So he didn't go in with this, I've already reached this foregone conclusion, and I'm going to cherry pick the facts that prove it. It was, I'm going to take in information and digest it and think about what it really means. I like that kind of perspective. And I also like that throughout the story, Doug's voice, which is very humorous and very real, without trying too hard to be funny, that really shines through those pages. So that's the kind of approach I like. In terms of what I gravitate towards subject-wise, I love books about food. And food history. One of my all-time favorites is Tamar Alexander's An Everlasting Meal, which, in the plainest terms, it's a book about eating well with leftovers, which doesn't sound that exciting. But it's a stunning, her writing style is just beautiful. It's absolutely stunning. And basically what she's saying is, you don't have to start from scratch every night. Think about what you already have and how you can use that food to be delicious. But there's something about the way she writes where I'm like, I just want to make everything in this book. I tend to read that once a year, actually. I enjoy the writing so much. Wow. Okay. And she has a new cookbook coming out this year, so I'm very excited.
That is exciting.
I know.
Is it also about leftovers?
I don't believe so. I think it's like American classics reinvented or re-examined.
That still sounds wonderful.
Yeah, I'm going to enjoy that.
Yeah.
And I also really love anything about urban planning.
Okay.
Which is extremely nerdy, and I recognize that. It's interesting. I really like the idea of how urban planning, things like how wide the streets are and how much space is there between the sidewalk and the traffic. Like, do you have trees in the way, or what's the speed limit? What are the zoning laws? Those are all very nerdy decisions, but they have a genuine impact on how a community functions and how close-knit a community can be.
Yes, it can change the feel of a community.
It really can. And working now in Libertyville, I think they've done a really good job with some of that to make sure, particularly in this downtown area, that it does feel like a community. I really enjoy books like that. Jeff Speck's The Walkable City is probably one of my top 5 nonfiction titles ever.
Okay.
So
your to-be-read pile that you're hoping to
It's so long.
work your way through this year.
So bad. I think I was really realistic, though, and I only said, like, one title a month because I figured that would be combined with my nonfiction.
Uh-huh.
That's 3 homework-type titles a month, and that would
Right.
leave me plenty of time for fun reading.
Right. For somebody who reads 150 books a year, yes.
So let's see. I was super proud of myself because I kind of knocked off all 3 categories at once this month. I read Persepolis 1 and 2 by Marjane Satrapi, and it's been sitting on my shelf forever.
It's sitting on my shelf at home.
See?
Still wrapped.
Okay.
Yeah.
I think I've started it, like, I've probably started it, I don't know, 12 times.
Right.
But this time I was like, no, it's on my list. I have to do it. And it's a graphic novel memoir about the author's life growing up in Iran during the revolution. And so I am not by nature a person who enjoys graphic novels. I want large chunks of text. It makes me sad when those are interrupted by pictures. So graphic novels are actually really hard for me to read because I'm like, just give me more words, enough of the pictures.
You want the pictures described to you in words.
I would actually rather you just describe the picture. Yeah, that's
right, yeah.
totally me. So that being said, I really enjoyed it. It was fascinating to me how she could convey emotion with just a few lines on a character's face. So I read both volumes of that, book 1 and book 2. I really enjoyed it. I don't know that I will feel the need to reread it.
Okay.
So it will probably go find a new home somewhere else. At this point, I tend to only keep books that I want to reread someday because I am a big rereader as well.
That's a goal of mine as well. Librarians, despite our constant access to books everywhere, also tend to have a lot at home, and it can be overwhelming.
But it's very consoling to see. They're like friends, and to have them all there and available. Yeah, no. Getting rid of books is very hard for me.
Yeah. In your to-be-read pile, is there kind of a common thread that you're seeing amongst all those books? Are they all, like, mine tend to all be what would be considered classics.
Yeah.
Like, oh, I never read that in school. I should read that.
I think there's a fair number of titles where I loved something else that the author wrote.
Oh, yes.
And so I want to read something else by them. So I really love Richard Powers and Barbara Kingsolver. And so I have a book by each of them. The Lacuna by Kingsolver. I have something by Richard Powers, whatever his most recent one is, because I just really, The Goldbug Variations is one of my all-time favorite books.
Okay.
And so I've got one by him. I have a Neil Stevenson, which is like 8 million pages long.
Aren't all of his 8 million pages long?
But I love his stuff so much. I will put up with, and again, I like those big chunks of text. So those books that are like, yes, we will be your friend for a long time. It starts with A. It's the Neil Stevenson that starts with A.
There you go.
So I've got that one, and then I have Attachments by Rainbow Rowell, because I really, really loved Eleanor and Park, and many people have recommended Attachments to me.
Okay.
Other than that, I don't know that there's a common thread.
That sounds nice, though.
Yeah.
To have authors you already know you enjoy.
Yeah.
I tend to do that as well. Once I find an author, if I really like their books, then I'm like, okay, well, everything by this author is going on my to-be-read list.
Absolutely.
Okay. So finally, I want to talk about what might be somebody else's resolution, which is to read more. Obviously, that's not your resolution.
Not this year.
As you read quite a bit. But I know I follow a lot of people on Goodreads, and every year they have their reading goal, where you can choose how many books you want to read, and then you keep track of it throughout the whole year, and then you get little updates for yourself. You get updates on other people's reading goals.
Do they give you prizes? Like, if you get to a milestone, do you get, like, confetti when you log in?
No.
They should do that.
Once you hit it, you get a congratulations.
I feel like they need to help you hit your milestones. That helps.
So, if that is somebody's goal this year, and without the help from Goodreads,
right?
How would you recommend somebody goes about trying to read more?
Okay, so first of all, I should say that I am not a Goodreads user, which I know is a terrible thing to admit, but I am super old school, and I have a notebook, and I just log what I've read in the notebook. I don't rate it. I put the title, the author, if it's part of a series, the date I finished it, and then what number it is on my count.
Okay.
Because the first year I didn't keep that running count.
Oh, and then you had to go back and count.
I had to go back and count. And I kept counting wrong because, again, math is not my strong suit. I think there are a couple of things. The most obvious suggestion would be audiobooks. Because I love those big blocks of text, and I'm a very fast reader, audiobooks generally don't work for me. Also, if I listened to them, I would be listening in the car, and I get so immersed in a book, I don't think it's safe for me to operate heavy machinery while listening to a book.
Yeah.
That's a problem. But many people are able to multitask, and I think audiobooks are definitely a way to go about that. Most of the big readers I know usually have multiple books going at once. One in print, one on their Kindle, that's an audiobook. The other thing I would say is, for me, I'm reading for pleasure. I mean, I do read for work as well, but I love reading so much that it doesn't really feel like work unless the book is absolutely terrible.
Right.
But my family has recognized that I tend to get a little twitchy if I don't get enough reading time. And so really, it's better for all of us if Mom gets some reading time. So could my house be cleaner? Yes, it could. Or I could, not turn into a terrible psychotic monster.
Right.
So to me, and my family, and my family, they are all readers as well, and so they completely respect the notion that you should just spend your time reading instead of cleaning. They could probably do with more cleaning, actually, now that I think about it. I've also gotten really good at reading one-handed.
Okay.
So, I can prop up the book and read while I'm doing some things.
Okay.
I can read in the car. I don't get car sick.
Oh. That's nice.
So if we're on a trip, I often make my husband drive so that I can read. But I think it really comes down to finding those little pockets of time, or even if you're only reading a few pages, or maybe you need that time to warm up and get started and really get hooked.
Right.
Finding those little pockets of time and making it a priority both help. Now, if you are having trouble finding something to read, one, I think, as I've talked about before, I think it's good to push yourself outside your usual tastes, challenge yourself a little. You might find something you really enjoy, and at least you've tried, just like it's good to try new foods and try new books. But if you're having trouble finding those new titles, one thing I would strongly recommend is that you take advantage of Cook Library's Bookies service.
That's a good idea.
Yes. The Bookies are a variety of employees who are skilled at what we call reader's advisory, and they will help you find a good book. You can go on the website, see our pictures under the, I think it's Books, Movies, Music tab.
You can also go straight to cooklib.org/bookies. And it'll get you right there.
You are definitely the lady who would know that. So you can look at our pictures, you can see what we like to read, what our interests are, figure out who among the bookies might match up with your tastes, and then click on it, click on their picture, and you can actually just request us to help you find a book. You could also submit a general bookies request if you don't know. And, the form asks things like, what's the last thing you enjoyed? How do you feel about these different genres? Is there anything you really definitely don't want to read? But I think it's a really excellent tool for finding your next great read.
Absolutely.
And then you can just zoom into the library and pick your stuff up off the hold shelf, and then you've got more time to read.
Yep.
You can even just get it at the drive-thru, but don't drive and read. You can drive and listen to an audiobook.
No driving and reading. We are not.
That was a lesson that my father had to learn when I was a child.
Oh, yikes. Yes.
Yeah. He liked to, he had a book in the car for stoplights. That didn't always end as well as you might think. They're not that long.
They're not that long.
I come by my bookish ways, honestly.
There you go.
So,
All right. Yes, I will second utilizing the bookie service that we have here. We have lots of online tools out there. There's all sorts of technology that can give you an algorithm that tells you what to read next. But you just can't beat a personal recommendation.
Because you could talk to a real person and say, I love urban planning books, but it needs to have a distinctive voice.
Right. That's not something you can really Google.
No, you really can't.
I think we've had lots of ideas, lots of good recommendations, and especially a good recommendation for how to increase your reading this year. That's your 2018 goal. So thanks for joining us on the podcast today.
Thanks for having me.
Thanks again to Erica for joining us. If you missed Erica's original blog post, you can find it on the eLibrary's blog at shelflife.cooklib.org. If you're interested in using the Bookie service to get some reading recommendations and to help broaden your 2018 reading list, you can find that on our website at cooklib.org/bookies. If you enjoyed this podcast, please share it with your friends and family. And if you'd like to take that extra step, you can write a review for us on Apple Podcasts. That's it for this episode, but we'll be back soon with another one. Until then, keep reading, keep watching, and keep listening.